All right, welcome in. It's the MMQB podcast with Albert Breer, our video edition. Again, we're trying new things. This week, we're live on Periscope along with dropping this on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. And there's a ton to get to today. So what we're going to do today, a little different than we've done the last couple of weeks, the first couple of these. We are going to hit 5 news items like we have in the past, but then we're going to go to Periscope and we're going to answer all of your questions there. I think this is going to be a good way for you guys to interact with me. Also get something up on iTunes, so if you want to listen to us during your commute, you'll be able to do that. Or if you have a way to get around your boss and watch us on YouTube, you can do that also. So, all right, I think the big news, of course, of the day, of the night, of the last 24 hours, Jimmy Garoppolo is traded from the New England Patriots to the San Francisco 49ers. The shocking thing about this was the return. The Patriots only got a second-round pick back for a guy that many people in the NFL believe is a franchise-level quarterback. And Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch get a guy who they potentially could build around for a second-round pick, which, if you might remember, they got a second-round pick and a third-round pick. They got an extra third-round pick last year and this year in the trade for in the trade for the Bears trade up to get Mitchell Trubisky, and they picked up a 2 in the deal involving Alvin Kamara last year with the Saints. And so John Lynch doing a good job with this capital to begin with. Let's start with why Jimmy Garoppolo has gone from New England. I think the big thing here to look at was their ability to sign him long term. The Patriots knew how good their situation was. They've got the greatest quarterback of all time as their starter, 40 years old, but still playing like he's in his mid-30s. And in reserve, they had a 25-year-old who they believe could be his successor. This is the first quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo is, that they viewed internally as a potential successor to Tom Brady. They didn't look at Ryan Mallett that way. They didn't look at Brian Hoyer that way. They never looked at Matt Castle that way. Jimmy Garoppolo was the first player who was brought in who had the potential, as they saw it, to succeed Tom Brady. So why'd they pull the plug? Well, in the spring and the summer, as I understand it, they made an effort to sign Jimmy Garoppolo to a long-term deal. As I've been told, they were willing to pay him starter money. They weren't going to try to get him back at $4 or $5 million a year. They were willing to pay him as a starter and, in essence, carry 2 starting quarterback contracts on their books going forward. What they couldn't do, they couldn't give Jimmy Garoppolo the one thing that he really wanted, and that was playing time. And so I think the real argument here is the timing of the move, because if you'd come to this conclusion in February or March, well, then look at the environment you'd be trading him in. What was considered now we know how it's turned out. Deshaun Watson looks great, but at the time it was seen as one of the worst draft classes of quarterbacks in a long time. A free agent class where the best player was Mike Glennon. Garoppolo was still on his rookie deal. He was set to play for a little less than $900,000 in 2017, and there was recent evidence of his ability to play. He'd played during the 2016 season. So put all of those things into the mix. And if you were Cleveland or San Francisco or one of these teams in March or April, you might have been looking at paying a little bit more than you wound up paying, than the Niners wound up paying at the end of October. So I think the fair question here for the Patriots is, okay, yes, you tried to trade him, or you tried to sign him long-term in the spring. You tried to sign him long-term in the summer. And look, I think that's the right thing to do. If you can create that sort of certainty at the quarterback position long-term, you do it. There's no price too high to pay. That's why I applaud what the Eagles did a couple years ago when they signed Sam Bradford. They signed Chase Daniel. They traded up twice to get Carson Wentz. If Carson Wentz is the answer for 15 years, the rest of it doesn't matter. Same goes for what the Bears did last offseason, where they bring in Mike Glennon, they bring in Mark Sanchez, and they trade up to get Mitch Trubisky. If you get that right, it doesn't matter what the price is. So I applaud the Patriots for trying to keep both guys long-term. It was going to be impossible. I can also recognize that. You were going to have to, because he wasn't willing to sign a long-term deal, you were going to have to franchise tag Jimmy Garoppolo in 2018 at $22 million at least. That's the non-exclusive number. If you tagged him at the exclusive number, it would have been over $25 million. And Brady's only set to make $15 million in 2018, so you probably have to give Brady a raise then too. Plus, it's awkward because now you're asking Garoppolo to sit for a fifth year. So I totally understand why you couldn't move forward with that. In fact, I've been saying for months now that this was going to be too awkward. There's no way you could do this going into 2018. I think the problem for the Patriots here is, why didn't you identify it quicker? Why didn't you make the decision in March or April? I mean, now Jacoby Brissett's not on the roster anymore, and you got Philip Dorsett back for him, and we don't really know what Philip Dorsett's going to be down the stretch for the Patriots because we haven't seen a lot of him. So the other young quarterback's gone now. You didn't draft one in April, and now you're relying on a 40-year-old quarterback who is playing great, who I think is the MVP of the league now, but he's still 40, who's taken a lot of hits this year. And so I understand what the Patriots were doing in pulling the plug. My question is, look, Bill's obviously got Bill's got the benefit of the doubt, the ultimate benefit of the doubt, more benefit of the doubt than anyone in NFL history has ever had in how to operate a franchise. But I think that there is a fair question to be asked here about how you handled the last 6-7 months and why you didn't do this earlier. Okay, the flip side of this, I love it for the Niners. Look, if they get him signed long-term, great. If they don't, they can still tag him. If he's the answer for the next 10 years, tagging him is no big deal. They get at least an 8-game audition. Maybe they sign him long-term before the end of the season. Maybe they don't. But the bottom line is, I look at this and I say, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, they basically paid what the Jets paid for Christian Hackenberg to get Jimmy Garoppolo in their building. And now they get a good look at Jimmy Garoppolo over the next 2 months. And again, they've got mechanisms in place where they're going to be able to keep him. And so maybe Garoppolo goes. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Garoppolo is going to be a really good quarterback. And the guys I've talked to who've played with him and practiced with him in the last couple of years have echoed that. They all think he's going to be really, really good. But if he's not, I mean, it's a second-round pick. So I love this trade for the Niners. You get a high-end quarterback prospect in your building now, and you didn't pay a price that's going to prevent you from doing anything in the future. You still could go get another one if you want to. And you look at the maneuvering that Lynch did in the draft last year. Now, yes, you lose the second-round pick, but you still have your high first-round pick. You still have the Saints second-round pick, and you've got 2 third-round picks. So you come out of this, you've still got 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, and you're going to have over $100 million in cap space. So, again, signing Garoppolo will be no big deal. So love this trade for the Niners. The biggest question I have for the Patriots, and it sounds strange to be saying, the 0-7 Niners outfoxed the 5-time Super Bowl champion Patriots. But I love this trade for the Niners. I think it's low risk at this point, and it's got potential to be franchise changing. Whereas for the Patriots, I think the fair question to ask is, of course, whether or not this should have been done sooner. Number 2, and this news just broke, Ajayi is going to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 4th-round pick. So why do the Dolphins do this? Well, I think as much as anything else, it's Adam Gase being unhappy with where his program is right now. It's being unhappy with being shut out twice within a month, shut out by the Ravens on national television on Thursday night, being shut out a few weeks ago in London by the Saints. And this is a way to, again, sort of send one of those messages to his locker room that we are not going to put up with this anymore. And Ajayi has kind of been one of those guys over the course of the last couple of years that's always been on the fringes for Adam Gase. You may remember in the summer of 2016, during Gase's first training camp, things went sideways between Ajayi and Gase, and there was a feeling on the coaching staff that Ajayi had started to carry himself like he was the starter before he'd earned the job. He didn't want to play in the 4th preseason game, and he was vocal about that because he felt like he was the starter, And so the Dolphins wound up leaving him home from the opener. And so there were all kinds of issues there. And I think Ajayi, Jarvis, Landry to some degree, there are certain players in that locker room who have become, not that they're bad guys, but I think to some degree indicative of the issue that I think Gase thinks that he has now. And so this is a way to send a message to the locker room that we're not putting up with what we've seen over the last few weeks anymore. And it's been a strange season there to begin with. I mean, you have the hurricane, you've got the injury to Ryan Tannehill, you've got the Coke and Stripper story, which is strange to be talking on an NFL podcast about the Coke and Stripper stories, but that's what it was. It was a Coke and Stripper story. And so I think that this is as much as anything else to try and send a message by shipping off a guy who probably wasn't going to be a Dolphin long-term anyway. And for the Eagles, of course, it adds another body in the backfield. I think it probably allows the Eagles to use LeGarrette Blount a little bit more effectively, where, you know, his usage goes up a little bit now. And the Patriots, he had a career high for carries, I think, by November last year in New England. He's a little older. He's on the wrong side of 30. And so I think the ideal role for Blount now is to move into that short yardage, goal line, and closer role that he had before last year in New England. And so I think that this allows you to do that if you're Philadelphia. The Eagles have taken some risks, though, and that's worth mentioning also. And part of that's their confidence in Doug Peterson to get the job done. But Ajayi would be a risk to some degree. He's also got some injury history. Ronald Darby was one of those guys. And so, you know, Doug Peterson's shown a willingness, and that coaching staff has a willingness to take on guys who have some crap in their past. And this is another example of that. Number 3, Duane Brown shipped off to the Seattle Seahawks. Wow, this is crazy, huh? No big trades usually at the NFL trade deadline. We've got one of the maybe the 5 or 6 best left tackles of the last decade, a starting running back, and a potential starting quarterback traded, and we still got a few hours till the deadline. But Duane Brown's off to the Seahawks. I don't know how you don't like this move for Seattle. Russell Wilson, without much of an offensive line on Sunday, 26 of 41, 452 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Texans. The Seattle defense before Sunday, I think, was playing at their standard level, the level that you're used to seeing them at. I think that the Seattle defense, and I know they feel this internally, that there's a lot of potential for that defense to turn into the type of generational defense that they've had there in the past. The acquisition of Sheldon Richardson is a big part of that. Losing Averill hurts, of course, but you know, what's really interesting about this move from Seattle's perspective to me is it really shows that they're all in now, because part of this deal was a second-round pick in 2019, right? So you've got that. You traded this year's second-round pick for Sheldon Richardson. So you're really sending the message, okay, a lot of our defensive core, those guys are on the back end of their prime, and we'll see where we are in a couple of years, but we need to capitalize on what we've got right now. And so I think it's obviously it fixes a long-term problem. They've had that issue at left tackle forever in Seattle. This is a guy who could probably play at an all-pro level for the next 2 or 3 years. So you help yourself there offensively, and it does send that message to the locker room. All right, we're all in with you. We traded for Sheldon Richardson. We made a strength even stronger. And now we're going and we're shoring up a weakness with a big-time player. These are not like role players they're bringing in. And they're bringing in Sheldon Richardson, who's probably one of the 10 most talented defensive linemen in football. Whether he plays his potential is another thing, but talent-wise, that's where he is. And then Duane Brown, who's been one of the, again, probably the 5 or 6 best left tackles in football over the last 10 years. So Seahawks, to me, the headline here, they're all in for 2017. And on the flip side, obviously, the Texans here come out of that deal. And, you know, I think a big part of this is that they played well without Duane Brown during his holdout. Okay, number 4, Zeke Elliott is suspended for the next 6 weeks. This, of course, is still subject to the appeal to the Second Circuit. So where we're at with this now, it went through the district level and the circuit level in Texas. Now it's gone through the district level in New York. go to the circuit level. Obviously, the next level after the circuit level is the Supreme Court. We've been down these roads before with players in the past, most recently Tom Brady. So you never say never. And there's a possibility that he's going to be back on the field. But, man, this is tough for the Cowboys. They've got a young defense. They're playing a lot of young guys. Their first three draft picks are guys who they've relied on: Jordan Lewis, Taco Charlton, and Chidobe Awuzie. And their schedule from here, okay? They play the Chiefs on Sunday at home. They go to Atlanta. Then they've got the Eagles at home. Then they've got the Chargers, who are no easy out. And then they've got the Redskins. That's their November. And so that's difficult enough. So you're going to have to manage that. Here's the other thing. I mentioned all those guys on defense, how they're playing so many young guys on defense. Here's the issue. Look at their last 5 games. They've scored 28, 30, 31, 40, and 33 points. And they've only gone 3-2 in that stretch. This has become who they are as a team right now. They have to score because the young defense needs time to grow. Now, talking to people there, they think once we get to December, they'll be okay on defense because some of those young guys, they're expecting those guys to grow up a little bit. But that's a long runway. And to be able to survive what they've got in front of them, the schedule they've got in front of them for the next 6 weeks won't be easy. And they're already 2.5 games behind the Eagles in the NFC East. So this is a tough one for the Cowboys. Again, it's not totally over. Zeke could still get this overturned in the circuit court. But if he is going to serve the 6-game suspension now, the timing isn't great because the schedule is stiff. They're playing from behind right now in the NFC East. And they've developed this identity as a team that scores a lot. And even when they've scored a lot, you know, the Rams, the Packers beat them in shootouts. Now, the last couple of weeks has been a little bit better defensively, but the competition hasn't quite been the same. I mean, the Niners obviously are winless right now. They beat the Redskins in Landover on Sunday in an absolute monsoon. And so it'll be interesting to see where this goes forward and if they can shift the identity of the team. But the timing, I think, sucks for the Cowboys. And number 5, the Denver Broncos, Trevor Siemian, and the way he played on Monday night, I've been letting him off the hook lately. I don't know if I can anymore. The offensive line was fine. C.J. Anderson rushed for 78 yards on 15 carries. That's over 5 yards a carry. Siemian just didn't play well. And now you have to ask the question, and it's the same sort of question I was asking with the Seahawks, right? The same sort of thing we were talking about with the Seahawks. The Seahawks are in that window where that defense it's a win now defense. Well, the Broncos are on the back end of the Broncos defense is on the back end of its prime. So where do they go from here? The Broncos have Aqib Talib, Von Miller, Brandon Marshall, Derek Wolfe, Chris Harris. There's just a lot of win now players in that defense. The offensive line got better. Trevor Siemian threw 3 picks. The Broncos lost. And to me, this is as much about the failure of Paxton Lynch as anything else. Because by now, Paxton Lynch should be the quarterback in Denver. You spent a first-round pick on him. You moved up to get him. And if in year 2 your quarterback's playing this way, and you've got a young franchise quarterback playing behind him or sitting behind him, they couldn't unseat him. And I know he's hurt. I know he's been hurt. But this is about Paxton Lynch not being able to wrest that job from Trevor Siemian. And we'll see what happens next. We'll see whether or not they have to turn to Brock Osweiler because maybe Paxton Lynch isn't quite ready yet. But quarterback's a problem there. And now you wonder how the defense is going to react to all of that. Okay, so those are my 5 things. I will answer all of your questions on Periscope now. I see that number's way down. My Periscope's acting funny, but I'm happy to answer all of your questions down here on Periscope. We're going to put this up on Apple Podcasts. We're going to put it up on YouTube. Fire away with all of your questions now. Okay, let's go. The first question I got, somebody said Brady's set for the next 4 years. I don't think that necessarily is the case. I don't think that they're necessarily going to have Brady for the next 4 years, but this at least tells you that they are comfortable with him well into his 40s. That what they've seen thus far tells you that he's going to be able to completely break precedent, and you don't do this. You don't leave yourself without another quarterback on the roster if you don't feel comfortable with your quarterback now and at least for a few years. And so absolutely, now this is confirmation that the Patriots are all in on Tom Brady. Drake or Williams in Miami. I like Kenyon Drake. I think there's some more that they can do with him. We'll see whether or not that works out. Kenyon Drake's one of these players, too, that sort of fits what Adam Gase wants in his running backs. Guy who can do different things, who was moved around a lot at Alabama, and I think has potential to be more than he's been over the course of his first year plus in the league. What about the Ajayi situation? The knee issues might be part of it, but I think it's as much the kind of guy he is as anything else. Tom Telfer, Cousins to the Jets. I think that's a possibility. Will the Jags pick up Cousins in the offseason? Again, the Garoppolo trade, this is as much about Cousins as anything else. I'd agree with people who are bringing that up. The Niners were absolutely the love between Kyle Shanahan and Kirk Cousins is real, and so I think the fact that the Niners are now off the table as a potential suitor for Kirk Cousins, and who knows, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo falls on his face and that changes. But right now, the Niners are off the table as a potential suitor for Kirk Cousins. That means the Jaguars, the Jets, the teams out there, I mean, even like the Saints, if like somehow Drew Brees wound up leaving there are other teams out there. But the two obvious ones that we'd been talking about for the entire summer before that July 14th deadline passed, the Niners and the Rams now both seem like they're off the table because the Niners have Jimmy Garoppolo and the Rams have looked good behind Jared Goff. More questions. Do you think the Eagles are done? Do you seem pretty active in talks? I could see them bringing in an offensive lineman. Would Hugh Jackson resign from the Browns if it didn't destroy his chances of becoming a head coach again? No, because if he resigns, then they still have control over what he can do. They still have him under contract, and so it would be hard for him to move to another place, like, say, Cincinnati, if he wanted to take over for Marvin Lewis. Likelihood the Patriots draft another quarterback this year. I think it is likely that they draft one this year, but you can really never predict what they're going to do. What Dolphin running back in fantasy now? Go to your waiver wire and pick up Kenyon Drake. Zeke going to sit for 6 or chance of appeal? I think there is a chance for appeal. There is usually what you say in these situations is that one court doesn't want to overturn another. That said, I mean, generally that might be the way it is, but we've seen that play out in different ways over the course of the last few years. With some of these NFL cases, the decisions, involving the Brady case were overturned. Decisions involving this case were overturned. The circuit court in Texas overturned the district court, so never say never. Would you rather have Jimmy G right now or the 2018 draft class? I don't know. I mean, but the Patriots weren't going to be in a position to get a Sam Darnold or a Josh Rosen. So are the Pack done for this year? Yes. If Ohio State plays Bama tomorrow, what's the score? I think it'd be very close. Let's go. All right, how about this? I'll answer 10 more questions here on Periscope, and then I'm going to get out of here. Patriots going to flip the second rounder for something more today. I don't think they'll flip the second rounder, but I think that they still could be in the market for someone in the defensive front seven, maybe a run stopper. Number 2, will trading Jay Ajayi hurt the Finns more than help? No, because I think that they're in a weird place. Number 3, will Landry be traded? If so, what's the best landing spot? I would have told you Philadelphia would have been the best landing spot for him. Number 4, Skins trade for T.Y. T.Y. Hilton, I think, is a possibility to be traded. I think that you'd have to give up something significant to go and get him. I don't think the Redskins are the right landing spot for him. Number 5, what do you think the Jets will do with their quarterback situation in 2018? Cousins may be in play. I think that all depends on where their draft pick is. If their draft pick is outside the top 10, I certainly could see Kirk Cousins being in play. I think that they are, just know this, they're doing all the research on the rookies. Number 6, does Philly trade lead to an arms race among contenders? Not necessarily. Number 7, Chiefs do anything. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs tried to pick up a defensive back. Number 8, do the Bears do anything? The Bears still aren't. The Bears are in no man's land. Because John Fox and Ryan Pace have been there 3 years, it's hard for them to be sellers at this point. And I don't know how many pieces they have that are like legitimate guys other teams would want. But they're 3-5, so I'm not sure they'd be buyers either. Okay, 2 more questions, then we'll get out of here. What does Ajayi's trade mean for Blount? Again, I think it means for Blount a different role. I think you're going to move him into a role more like what you drew up in the offseason. I think they've used him a little too much at this point. I think he kind of settles into a role now where he's more of your short yardage back, your early down back, and then your closer late in games. Last question, number 10. If Hogan is out, I missed that one. You think the Vikings should trade a quarterback? I don't think that there's much value in their quarterbacks right now. I think you'd be selling low on Sam Bradford. You'd be selling low on Teddy Bridgewater because both those guys are hurt. It's the most important position. If you got 2 hurt guys at that spot, I think you hold on to both of them and you see what happens with them. Okay, so I'm sorry about any technical difficulty that happened over there. I'm not sure what exactly happened with the Periscope, but I appreciate you guys coming out. I want to try to grow this thing. I want to keep going with it. So we're going to keep putting this up on YouTube and on iTunes, and I want to try to keep doing the Periscope thing. So let me know what you think of it. Go and like my Facebook page. It's at Albert R. Breer. Go to my Twitter page. You can give me feedback there, at Albert Breer. I hope you guys like what we're doing here. I wanted to try to make this as current as we could, which is why we're getting Periscope involved. We're going to keep growing this thing. I appreciate you guys coming out. As always, subscribe to this podcast, the MMQB podcast with Albert Breer. You can also get the MMQB podcast with Peter King and the MMQB 10 Things podcast at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Same time next week, we'll be here again. Again, give me your feedback. We'll make this more interactive. We'll do everything we can to make this the best experience for you guys. We'll see you later.